Welcome everyone, welcome to the Void. Today we are going over some stuff that, frankly, this will help us decide what belongs in the Void and what you can actually keep with you. If there's anything worth getting rid of, just toss it into the Void here, and you won't have to worry about it ever again. But let's see. This is the bite model. For those who don't know, the bite model is was put out by Stephen Hassan in I guess 2000, and it's used to decide what is a cult and what is not a cult. And what I mean by that is what what organizations or structures control your behavior to the point that it becomes destructive. What organizations, what are ways that people or groups can control and alter people's personality, and thoughts and behavior to become different, to conform, and it is usually a destructive, in usually destructive ways. Sorry. So the BITE model stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. These are the four pillars on which the kinds of practices will be built on. So we'll get into examples later, like as we go through this, but I want to just go through what this all means and how it can how it can be shown, how it can be seen in the modern world. So first we have behavior control. This is practices, talking points, different things that are said or done to control a person's behavior, their outward expression. So first bit is a regulation of a person's physical reality. Where, hang on, is it visible in the chat? I can zoom it in a little bit more to make it clear. There we go. That's better. That's better. So first we have behavior control, which is the regulation of someone's physical reality. So this is like if you are encouraged to dress a certain way, to be around certain people, to drink or eat certain things, like adopt a certain diet, avoid certain foods, being reliant on the group, on the organization, whatever it is, for financial well-being, putting your energy into the group when you have free time, making the group your hobby rather than making your own passions your hobby, like constantly reinforcing that the group is what's important, and what the group says and what the group does and what the group looks like. That is what's important, more so than one's own personal expression. There's also a huge time commitment often seen in these groups. So if something requires you to like go and spend a lot of time every week to indoctrinate yourself, or just to do attendance and be a good member, say if you have to go to a certain place every week for 2 to 3 hours a week, and then maybe you go back to that group on another day for a different sort of event. Like, well, we're going to be talking about church, so what if you go to church on Sunday, but then you also go to church for youth group or men's group or women's group or whatever it may be, for another 2 or 3 hours that week. And it's the attendance is rewarded with social pressure. So the more you attend, the more gratification you get from the people around you. That is a way that you can see behavior control. Another point of behavior control is needing to ask permission for major decisions. This could be like marriage and divorce. This could be choosing your job, going to a group and saying, hey, I got this job offer. Do you think it's good? do you think I should take it? Now, this is different from like asking your friends or people you trust for advice, in that it's always going to revolve around this group and the group's opinion and the group's philosophy, more so, more so than your own life and preferences. So it's gonna the advice you get is going to circle back into the group and continue that feedback loop. Um, Need to report thoughts and feelings and activities to superiors. This is things such as confession or accountability buddies, where they have someone in the group that you talk to who is sort of who either holds you accountable or has some authority in the group, and they are the one that you talk to about problems you're having, usually based on the group's rules and philosophy and ways that you aren't living up to it, and and they would often encourage you to in ways to conform more so to the group's ideas, which kind of goes into the next one: rewards and punishments. So behavior modification techniques, this is like positive affirmations when you do things the group wants, and when you don't do things the group wants, when you do things for yourself, you get judged, or people like ostracize you a little bit. Your social standing goes down, or it could be that you lose privileges within the group because you are not putting in enough time as everyone else is. This is, I'll get into like levels of extremity with this kind of stuff, because just because some of this stuff happens in different organizations or groups doesn't necessarily mean it's a cult, but it's something to be aware of, because the more of these things that there are, the more the more cult-like it becomes. Going to the next point, individualism discouraged and groupthink prevails. This is, again, your own passions and ideas and personality matters less than the group. The more you are like the group and agree with those around you, the more you'll get those accolades and that social standing, or the financial rewards, whatever it may be, from the group itself. So the more groupthink there is, the more groupthink you exhibit in the group, the better you'll be seen in that group. Rigid rules and regulations. This is things like, if you want to be part of us, you can't do X, Y, and Z. So maybe if you want to be part of group X, you cannot eat broccoli. No broccoli allowed. Easy enough, right? It starts small, but then, you also have to avoid, I don't know, corn. No corn. Corn is bad. Well, corn involves corn sugar, corn syrup. That becomes an incredibly restrictive thing, where you suddenly have to go and like toss out a lot of food, because most of the food that we have uses corn syrup. Now, that's an example off the top of my head, but there are other examples I can pull from that we might get to later. And of course, 7, the need for obedience and dependency. So the more you listen to the group and depend on the group, the more you rely on the advice you get and go to the group for more advice, the more rewarded you will be, the better you will be seen in the group. The more you think for yourself and make your own decisions, the more independent you will be from the group, and thus your standing will go down. Then we get to information control. So information control is like what you see, what you hear about, what you're allowed to think about, what you're allowed to intake from the world around you. So to put it into perspective, if you're told that looking at certain sources is bad because it will be negative against the group, or if you aren't allowed to look at criticisms of the group from other sources, that is a form of information control, because you aren't allowing yourself to find critical information, literally critical of the group. So one example of this kind of thing is use of deception, where information is either held back or distorted or just completely made up. If people can tell you things that are not accurate. A good example here is QAnon, which has a lot of anti-vaxxers in it, and they may share a lot of fake statistics or misleading statistics that guide someone towards disbelieving in the safety and efficacy of vaccines. And so that kind of information control, where they also discourage people from looking at other stuff, which is the next point, access to non-cult sources of information is minimized or discouraged. So looking at sources that are like actual scientific sources about vaccines, not encouraged. It's actually seen as like fake news, or oh, you're falling for big pharma. And they have all of these techniques to discredit information from outside sources or former members as well. Former members is an important thing to notice. Another thing going up to relating to the behavior control of like keeping someone busy and putting their free time into the organization is if you keep them busy enough in the group, they won't have time to look for information or think about things from an outside perspective. Their whole time will be spent in the group instead. Compartmentalizing of information, outsider versus insider doctrines. So here, information isn't freely acceptable, and this is where you get those narratives of like, this information is good. If you get it from other places, it's bad. You can't trust it. It's big pharma. It's big government. It's the deep state. It's fake news. It's secular world news. It's whatever thing you want to put in there. It's untrustworthy because it's not from the group itself. Information varies at different levels and missions within pyramid. I'm not sure what that point in particular means. Leadership decides who, quote, okay, so this one though, leadership decides who needs to know what, is a point of like, just trust the leader. Trust them. They know what's happening. Trust whoever's in charge. They know more than you. They're playing 4D chess. They speak to God. They have access to greater knowledge. So whatever they tell you, it must be based on that greater knowledge. Do you know what that information is? No, you're not allowed to. That's for their ears only. They have special knowledge based on their position. But you don't get to know that. You just need to trust what they say. Spying on other members is encouraged. So again, going back to the accountability buddies from behavior control, you can see that it's not only used to monitor someone's behavior, but also the information, ensuring that there's always someone there to keep the groupthink going, to keep the group information and group philosophy continuous in the group. Like, you're always talking to someone from the group. You're always listening to someone from the group. You're always going about different things. Sorry, you're always going about with a group person, because it helps keep you accountable. And while that may be framed well in the group, it doesn't it doesn't end up leading to like actual good information or healthy habits. It leads to more isolation within the group. Reporting of deviant thoughts, feelings, or actions to leadership. Again, going back to behavior control, this is the same thing. Being held to a certain standard of behavior will also often lead to being held to a certain standard of information. What information are you getting? What information are you getting from in the group or out of the group? That all has to be monitored. And the more you trust just the group, the less suspicion will be cast on you. Extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda. So this is, the more you read materials from the organization that you're in, the more that you accept the quotes or the those little phrases that people say. Um, just trust in Q. It's 4D chess. Um, trust God. The you can't trust the world. That kind of thing. The more you like internalize that and rely on that kind of information, the more you trust like just the stuff you hear in the group, the less you'll be trusting stuff from outside the group. The more isolated you can be. Um, uh, the more moldable you become. Unethical use of confession. Note the term unethical here. This is an important part of the bite model where, yes, some of these things may exist outside of cults, but it's the way that they are used that becomes unethical and harmful. So just because something, a practice from the, it can be assigned to the bite model, doesn't necessarily mean that the organization or group where that practice is from is necessarily a cult. It depends on how it's used, it depends on a lot of other factors. But in this case, unethical use of confession is guilting people into following the group because they are not good enough to match up to the group's standards. And so to match the group's standards and quote be a good person, be a godly person or a wholesome person, you have to uh, acknowledge and get rid of those parts of you that are not helpful. You have to report on yourself to others within the group, and that information may be used against you. One good example is Scientology, where they have these therapy appointments or whatever. I don't know exactly what they're called, but they're basically therapy appointments where you are encouraged to share about not just your current life, but past lives as well. And a lot of the information about past lives will be just made up from the top of your head or suggested from the person who's collecting this information um, in a sort of guided question way. Like, oh, were you perhaps a baker? Okay. Were you a good baker? Or, sorry, were you a bad baker? And then you sort of like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what it was. And you go down this rabbit hole and you make up information about how in your past life you did X, Y, and Z. And then if you ever try to leave the group, they will use all of that information against you. They will shame you in public for what you said in almost said in custodial in in trust with the group. You said it like trusting that this stuff would stay there, but if you start straying, they'll use this stuff against you. Then we get to the third point, thought control. This is a very important one to acknowledge because this is something that happens a lot, and frankly, I don't. This is something that is, to me, the most one of the more insidious ones because it's not always easy to notice at first. So the first point here is the need to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. So whatever the group says, that's just how it is. You can't doubt the group. That's how it is. Oh, if you have doubts about the group, you have to just doubt your doubts and accept what the group says. This will often lead to black and white thinking, us versus them. Those polarities of like the group that says this and anyone who says differently. If you think differently, you are bad, you are evil, you are not worth associating with. You are giving us bad information, and therefore we will not listen to you. We will keep our thoughts to ourselves. It's very easy to create that dichotomy once you start accepting only this is true and everything else is false. 2. Adopted, quote, loaded, unquote, language characterized by, quote, thought terminating cliches, unquote. Words are the tools we use to think with. These special words construct rather than expand understanding. Constrict rather than expand understanding. I'm sorry. Um, they function to reduce complexities of experience into trite, platitudinous buzzwords. So this is things such as God would not give you more than you can handle. If you come to a church with a like serious problem in your life, one thing you may often hear is God would not give you more than you can handle. If you are dealing with this, that means you can handle it, and you should be able to find a way out of it. And that's it. They aren't going to try to give you a solution. They aren't going to try to find a solution. That's where the problem ends. God, just trust God. God is the answer. Just He knows what you can do. Just so trust Him. He's what you need. Um, it's a very dangerous sort of thing. And if you've ever argued with someone who just will not change their mind, you'll often run into one of these. I know a good example is when I was arguing with my dad, who's very right wing, very very stubbornly right wing. I would debate him, but often I would just get to a point where he just keeps repeating, small government is the best. You can't trust big government. You have to trust small government. That's just more efficient. That's just more effective. And I would ask why, and he would just keep saying that over and over again because that's all he had. That was his thought terminating cliche. That's where his line of thought ended. When you get down to like someone's base of thought, that's something you have to look out for and immediately analyze if you notice you have those of your own. Um, 3. Only good and proper thoughts are encouraged. So these are whatever the group decides is good and proper, whatever the group decides is worth listening to, or whatever the group's standards are, that is considered good and proper. And whatever fits within those standards is encouraged. Anything that does not fit is discouraged. So this would often result in again going back to information control. Which one was it? Extensive use of generated information propaganda. The more you listen to that information propaganda, and the more you like repeat that information and propaganda, the better you will be seen in the group because you are seen as accepting the group mentality. Number 4, thought-stopping techniques to shut down, quote, reality testing, unquote, by stopping, quote, negative thoughts and allowing only, quote, good thoughts. Rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, and constructive criticism. So this could be denial or rationalization and justification. So like if you get someone to the point where they're like trying to defend a terrible point because they got backed into a corner, that's often a sign to look out for. That's not necessarily saying that they are in a cult or have a cult-like mindset, but it is something to be aware of. Chanting or meditating. So if you go up to someone and try to have a conversation, and rather than engaging with you, they just like start singing or like repeating a phrase over and over and over again. Or whenever someone is having doubts, they start meditating and going into the sources of their group, and meditating on that rather than engaging and listening to other sides. That is a form of thought control. That because you are literally they are literally stopping their own thoughts in that direction by using certain behaviors just to cut it off. Also included in this is speaking in tongues and singing or humming, which again all are behaviors that you can do to just end the train of thought. No critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy are seen as legitimate. So if you start questioning where things are coming from or why the group believes in certain things, this is something they will look at you and say, you're just you just don't believe hard enough. You need to go and reread the group information. You need to just trust in what the group says. Trust in the loaded language. And um, this is where some gaslighting may come into play, where anytime someone has a legitimate question, the group will throw it back at them as if they are the one who is wrong for asking that question. And that just because they asked that question, they need to go into further and deeper into the group. And the more they go into the group, the better they will be. It's a dangerous sort of road to go down, because the moment you start criticizing is the moment you start experiencing emotional whiplash. 6. No alternative belief system viewed as legitimate, useful, or good. So this is basically, and the group is the only truth. This is where you get your good information. Anything else? No, you can't trust it. It's not helpful. It's not useful. You can't trust anything outside of the group. So thoughts that are based on things from outside the group, you can't. You have to get rid of those, and it becomes really dangerous. It becomes like you start erecting these walls of like, oh no, that's actually not from the group. Well, I can't do that. Thought terminating cliches activate, and you isolate yourself from that thing. And then you think of another thing that, oh no, that's from outside the group as well. And then another thought terminating cliche, and you build a wall against that thing, and you start like isolating your own thoughts in your head, catching and controlling them to the point where the only thoughts you have are the thoughts that are allowed by the group. And this is where it can really get insidious. Next up, emotional control. So this is this is sort of like if how you're feeling must be monitored. How you're reacting to things must be monitored, because your reactions will tell you how deep your belief is in the group's philosophy. So the first point: manipulate and narrow the range of a person's feelings. So this is often seen as God will make you happy. The happier you are, the more you have the Spirit. This will be used to. You'll see people who are in a cult often have these big smiles on. Often like fake smiles, creepy smiles. You know that cliche of like, oh, those people, they have those like plastered on smiles, and like, hello, we are delighted to see you. That kind of thing. That's emotional control. That's the result of emotional control, where they are only allowed to present certain emotions, no matter how they feel. And it results in their range of emotions being limited to the point where that's all they're able to exhibit, or at least like consciously. You know, they might struggle with things, but that's all they allow themselves to exhibit. 2, make the person feel like if there are ever any problems, it's always their fault, never the leaders or the groups. So if you are struggling in your life or having doubts, you need to doubt your doubts. You need to examine your sins. You need to examine why you think you don't believe in the group, because the group is good. The group is right. The group has the best information. And if you don't end up trusting it, oh, well, welcome back. Welcome back. We've been going over the bite model, and Aragon, if you ever need to catch up, you can always check my YouTube channel. I'll be uploading this in the next couple days. Where was I? Make the person feel as if there's any problems, it is always their fault, not the leaders or the groups. Okay, so they will make you think that the group is like this perfect thing, the good, whole, wonderful standard that everyone has to hold themselves to. And anytime you fall short, anytime there are problems in your life that the group can't handle, it's because you aren't adapting to the group well enough, and you need to fix yourself before the group does anything. It leads to self gaslighting and self indoctrination, and it's very insidious. 3. Excessive use of guilt. So, identity guilt. So, if who you are or who your family is, things you've done in your past, who you know, or your own feelings and reactions to things, however valid they may be, all of that can be seen by the group as not worth keeping and must be gotten rid of. You'll see this a lot in cults where anyone who is in the out group, anyone who is the other, they are they can be used against you. Like, oh yeah, this person, yeah, they're a great member of the group, but I heard their brother is actually is still talking to them. Their brother who isn't part of this church or isn't part of this group. And suddenly, just because they have an association with someone from outside of the group, or just because that person has thoughts, let's say this person is college educated, and so is a bit more clever than most. They will they will find themselves having to submit themselves to the group's ideology in order to find acceptance before they are able to analyze things or accept their own reactions to the group. We'll go over ways you can see this today as we go through some of the material I've gathered. Another point here with excessive use of guilt: social guilt or historical guilt. So this is like the social standing thing, where the more you are allowed, the more you are seen around the group doing the right thing, the more your standing will go up, and the more the people in the group will associate with you and be friendly with you and be kind to you, and the more help and support you'll get, and that feels wonderful. That genuinely does. Humans enjoy connection. But if you start to stray, that can be used as a weapon against you, where, oh no, you aren't being good enough, you aren't being acting correctly, so we're going to just step back and avoid this. It's not a healthy kind of relationship. Excessive use of fear. So this is a fear of being outside from outside the group, a fear of not fitting in to the group thing, the group mentality, a fear of enemies and persecution from outside the group. So if you see people talking about how the outside group is going to get you and hates you, and that the outside group, they cannot be trusted because they don't believe in this group. They have a different worldview from you, and so that becomes dangerous. That is an example of an excessive use of fear, or a fear of losing one's salvation or the group support around you. That is also an excessive use of fear, where if you stray from the group, if you stray from what the group says and what the group teaches, you will find yourself being more and more isolated until there's no one around you, because a lot of times these groups will have you cut yourself off from support outside of the group, so that you're only reliant on the group, and that works as long as you stay part of the group. But the moment you try to think for yourself and be independent, they start cutting you off, and then you have nothing, and then you are left alone and friendless in the world, and that is a terrible place to be, and that leads to fear of any doubts, anything that could cause someone to struggle in the group, and that's when you have that's when they will like throw themselves back into the group out of this sense of fear that they don't want to have the disapproval or be shunned and lose what they've gained from the group. 5. Emotional highs and lows. So This could be like you go to the group and you feel amazing, you feel wonderful. Oh my gosh, there was some amazing songs and the people there kept talking to you and you felt wonderful. Yeah, you're doing great. And then you get home, right? And then you're on your own and you don't have that support around you anymore. And suddenly you drop and you start having doubts and you start going to the spiral of doubts and thought stopping techniques and trying to understand, why am I doubting? Why am I not accepting? Am I good enough? Am I really worth being in this group? And you just go down in the spiral until you go into the group again and you feel that energy around you again, and you just like, oh my gosh, no, this is wonderful, this is actually great, and you go on that high again. And that is a very dangerous and addicting cycle of you hit it and quit it. Not no no that's not exactly right, but like it is a sort of a social drug where you have this social high of like being people being around you and this um, emotional like joy that you get, and then the moment things are change or you have doubts, immediately it spirals thanks to the fear and the guilt, and the control and information control of like having to report this stuff, and it becomes very dangerous overall. Okay, ritual and often public confession of sins. So this would be like Scientology again, where every week or every month, I don't know how often it is, you would go in for one of those therapy sessions and you just talk about your life and the things you did wrong and why you haven't ascended to the next level yet and the ways that you can ascend to the next level. Um, or another example is, I'm trying to think of one other than religion, because there are non-religious cults. Um, this one is hard to do outside of religion, but it's certainly possible. There's, of course, Catholicism, where you go and like you confess to the priest and you say like, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," and you have to rehash anything that you did that didn't match what the church wants. Um, that that results in that sort of, you have to go through all, you have to think about and hold on to all of the things you did wrong so that you can report on it to someone else and have that shame and that guilt brought back up, um, for the group's sake, for the sake of um, what you are doing uh, within the group, for the group's behavior and health. I, this is this is the kind of thing where like anytime you have those lows, you have to report on those lows as a sin and something you're doing wrong, because you can't have lows, you can only have the highs. The highs are the good stuff, the highs are what the group encourages. If you have a low, that means you aren't good enough, that means you need to go deeper into the group. 7. Phobia indoctrination, programming of irrational fears of ever leaving the group or even questioning the group's authority. The person under the, it says mind control, but I prefer groupthink or group influence, um, cannot visualize a positive, fulfilled future without being in the group. That's an important point. So anytime someone imagines themselves as in their future, they always see it as, oh yeah, and I'm going to, I'm going to just be a pastor, or be an interpreter of Q, or I'm going to, um, in Scientology, I'm going to rise to like the third, 3 levels above where I am now, and then everything will be good, and the group will be doing better, and everything will be wonderful. But the group is always central in these ideas. So any happiness or fulfillment from outside of the group is discouraged, because that is outside of the group. That is antithetical to the group philosophy, to the group think, and so that must be discouraged. Um, the going back to the fear, you have consequences that may happen if you leave the group. So if you think about your future outside of the group, all you'll be thinking about is all of the terrible things you've been told would happen if you leave. Hell is a good example. If you leave, you are going to hell. If you leave, you are no longer going to ascend to the next level. If you leave, you are leaving the fight against the child molesters in Q. If this is QAnon, you are becoming a passive sheep, and how and then you have all that public shame. There's rumors of like other things that happen, incurable diseases, accidents, things that if you don't have the blessing of the group, then or suicide, like, oh, see, secular people commit suicide, but religious people, oh no, we're the good ones. We have God, so therefore we don't commit suicide. Anyone who commits suicide must be outside of the group, must be atheist or must be pagan, because good Christian people don't do that. This also, by the way, leads to a lot of no Scotsman fallacies, where anyone who was a member of the group but does one of these things, no, they weren't a true member. They were just faking it. They didn't really understand or accept what the group says. Um, that that happens a lot because people don't want to acknowledge that the group itself can have negative consequences. And so they will blame that person and gaslight that person into thinking that they are the problem, which again goes back to um, thought control. Shunning leave takers. Again, the social consequences of leaving, where if you leave, you are completely isolated and have no support around you. Never a legitimate reason to leave. So this is like anyone who leaves, you weren't really part of the group to begin with. You fell for the outside philosophies, for the dirty world around you. You fell for the lies of the deep state. You fell for the lies of the cabal, whatever it may be. You would be shamed and mocked, ridiculed, and your standing would be destroyed. So the thing is with the bite model, it sort of works on a exponential graph, growth thing, where when you're trying to rank things, it'll be like a 1, which isn't that bad. It's like, okay, this exists within the group on some level. And then it goes to 3, which is, all right, this exists and it's somewhat common, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means it exists. 5 is, it's getting a little more serious. It meets multiple points from each of the. It meets multiple points from an individual point. So, like, if it was behavior control and you met regulation of physical reality and individualism discouraged and rigid rules and regulations, that might be a 3 if those rules and regulations are not too disruptive to someone's life, but the more disruptive they become, the higher it goes. So it goes 1 and then 3 and then 5 and then it jumps to 8 and then it jumps to 13. I believe it jumps, 13, and then I think it's 17 and 21. I might have it wrong, but I think that's how it goes. 21 is the highest. If something hits 21, that means this is incredibly dangerous and it hits everything to the highest extreme that it can. That is something that is something like the Jonestown cult, where the behavior and information and thoughts were controlled so much that it resulted in people taking their own lives and the lives of others because they could not think outside of the group. Hydrate. So this is the bite model. This is what we can use when we are examining cults, when we are examining religion, when we are examining different groups. This is what we want to use to sort of analyze how dangerous is this? How dangerous is this message? How dangerous are the consequences of what these people are saying and doing? Um, is it like bad but not like terrible? Is it actually really dangerous and insidious, or is it just like banal? The bite model will help us decide that. So I wanted to give everyone like a brief rundown on what the bite model is and why it's important and how it can relate to cults that exist out in the real world. If you have any examples of your own that you'd like to share, feel free to drop them in the void. If you think I missed something or misspoke on something, if you think I said something wrong or you just disagree with me and the whole bite model, leave it down below. Talk to the void. The void will respond. I'm happy to see what everyone has to say. I love you all. Thank you for coming. Don't forget to like, comment, share. The void loves you.